In a room shrouded in shadow and mystery, a young man awoke abruptly to the piercing chime of his phone's alarm. His eyes fluttered open, his mind still groggy from sleep, but the moment he became aware of his surroundings, he was engulfed by a deep sense of unease. The entire room was covered in ominous red inscriptions, sprawled across the walls and ceiling in frantic, jagged strokes. Confusion flooded his consciousness as he wondered who could have etched those markings onto the walls while he was unconscious. Yet, as he watched, the red writings slowly began to fade away, disappearing as mysteriously as they had appeared. A wave of disbelief washed over him. Perhaps he had been hallucinating, he thought, especially since he had just woken up. The room still looked eerily realistic, almost tangible in its details. Still, he couldn't shake the sensation that something was profoundly wrong. His gaze drifted around the unfamiliar space, realization dawning that this was not his usual bedroom. It was a place utterly foreign to him, and with every passing second, the sense of strangeness deepened. He stood up carefully, feeling the cool floor beneath his feet. His eyes began scanning his immediate environment. What he had eaten earlier, the 2 crumpled tissues discarded on the floor, weren't there anymore. Everything that was once familiar seemed to have vanished without a trace. The fragments of his memory felt disconnected, as though they belonged to someone else's life, not his own. Confusion intensified, and a creeping fear crept into his mind. He was beginning to believe he was trapped in a dream, yet nothing seemed to be dreamlike about the hollow silence and the unsettling stillness of the room. His heart hammered in his chest as fleeting memories surfaced of a life that wasn't his, of someone who looked exactly like him, sharing an identical face and features. The sense of déjà vu was overwhelming. Both of them, as he sensed, had been orphans, yet their lives had diverged drastically. One had pursued endless years of study and eventually entered a prestigious university, destined for a bright future. The other had forsaken education, ending up stuck in the monotony of a dreadful job, his life marred by regret and despair. As he lifted his trembling hand to examine it, he wondered, was he in an entirely different world? Could these disturbing words, smeared in what looked like blood, etched into the ceiling, possibly have any connection to the original owner of this body? Memories of that person, if such memories truly existed, offered no answers. There, in that silent space, he remained, desperately trying to piece together the puzzle of his own presence. Suddenly, a voice called out, breaking the oppressive silence. A woman's voice, gentle yet commanding, addressed him as husband and announced that breakfast was ready. Instinctively, he turned around. Standing there was a woman, her figure gracefully curved, her eyes filled with a steely determination, her gaze lingering on his thighs. The word husband echoed in his mind, but he found himself puzzled. Was this a different reality? Had he, the original person, married at such a young age in this parallel universe? She sat on the bed, motioning for him to get up. Her tone was insistent, almost alluring, as she urged him to rise before it grew too late. His mind spun with questions. The concept of transmigration, the idea that he had somehow shifted from one existence to another, began to seem less absurd. Yet, in her presence, he felt an inexplicable mix of fascination and trepidation. His cheeks flushed with a mixture of admiration and uncertainty. She was so beautiful, so gentle, and so foreign at the same time. She continued calling him to breakfast, her voice soft but insistent. Confused about what to call her, whether to think of her as baby, wife, or darling, he decided it would be easier to focus on her name, if only he could remember it. He tried to dredge up memories, trying to grasp onto anything familiar. But his mind remained dark and empty, devoid of names, experiences, hobbies, or any indication of her identity. He looked back, hesitating, his eyes fixed on her. It struck him as strange that she was perfectly still, somehow unnervingly so. The more he studied her, the more he sensed that something was profoundly wrong. A fly suddenly landed on his eye, further unsettling him. His thoughts spiraled into doubt. Who exactly was she? Was she real? Was she perhaps some manifestation of his subconscious? He paused. A second passed. Then, in a flash of terror, she spoke, her voice suddenly monstrous, her mouth distorting into something unrecognizable. His nervous gaze widened as she appeared to open her mouth wide, revealing horrific, jagged teeth. Cold sweat trickled down his brow as he tried to tell himself he was simply overwhelmed, confused by the situation. Maybe he was losing his grip on reality. He attempted to rationalize the chaos. His mind sought to convince him that he was merely disoriented, that with time clarity would return. But then, she morphed into a towering, grotesque creature, her form shifting into something monstrous, threatening. Her eyes glinted with a sinister light as she declared that he could see her true form now. Panic struck him, and he cried out in fear, but before he could escape, a terrible scene unfolded. She shed tears, pleading, before a sudden, violent attack consumed him. His body was overwhelmed by terror as she, his supposed wife, remarkably transformed into a predatory beast, her mouth widening to devour him alive. He was engulfed in darkness, the creature's maw closing around him. Then everything faded into nothingness. He woke again, whether from sleep or some other state, covered in cold sweat, heart pounding furiously. He looked up, hoping, desperately wishing that it was all just a nightmare. Yet, his gaze fell upon the same blood-red words painted on the ceiling, haunting him with their presence once more. They faded as mysteriously as before, leaving him with a gnawing sense of dread. He considered whether there might be clues hidden within those words. His own hand trembled as he stared at it, contemplating the possibility that he might have to pretend blindness to hide his awareness. But he knew, deep down, that such a lie wouldn't hold. There was no way he could ignore the truth. In the memories of the original owner of this body, he had been a man who had always been solitary, living unnoticed, and never experiencing anything out of the ordinary. That realization meant one thing. For now, he must conceal his knowledge of her presence. A hand gently pushed open the door and called to him softly, informing him that breakfast was ready. The woman, with a calm and seductive smile, approached him as he tried to steady his trembling nerves. He wondered how long he could continue this charade, how long he could pretend to be indifferent. He chose to observe, to learn about his life and the environment he had been thrust into, all the while battling the terror that she might detect his awareness. She laid a set of miniature dragon balls on the table, a game of fortune and mystery, and asked if he was awake. His body responded with cold sweat, and he realized that he was paralyzed, unable to move or look away, lest she realized that he was aware of her true nature. Her gaze lingered on him as she moved closer, her intentions clear but silent. He remained still, trying to hide his panic. Her presence was threatening, her eyes piercing into his soul. Sudden shifts in her expression, her smile fading into something more sinister, confirmed his fears. She leaned in, her face close to his, as if waiting for him to break. Yet, he held his composure, knowing that any reaction might spell disaster. Then, without warning, her tongue flicked out, an unnatural gesture, as it touched his face. The sensation was horrifying, sending chills down his spine. He instinctively flinched, but he dared not move further. Her gaze intensified, and he saw it. Her mouth was stretching open, revealing a terrible, monstrous maw, an abyss into which he feared he would be swallowed whole. He attempted to fight back, to strike her, to escape, but she was swift. She evaded his attack effortlessly, her form shifting in a parody of innocence and menace. In a final, desperate act, he bit her arm, hoping it would buy him a moment. But it was futile. Her strength was overwhelming, and he was dragged into a nightmare of pain and darkness. The last thing he saw was her transformed face, devouring him as he succumbed to unconsciousness once more. When he awoke again, it was the same cycle: cold sweat, heart racing, prisoned within a labyrinth of terror and confusion. The woman's voice echoed once more, announcing the breakfast, as she approached him with a predatory smile. Each time he was revived, the fear persisted, all rooted in the terrible awareness that she could see him, could see through his pretense. and that she would consume him body and soul. He remembered, with increasing clarity, that all his attempts at rational thought were futile. Each resuscitation left him more exhausted, more desperate. He tried to find a way out, but no escape was possible. The room remained sealed in its nightmare, and her presence, a constant threat. He knew that he could not confront her directly. His instinct was to hide, to pretend. But with each cycle, his understanding of his predicament deepened, and the dread of the inevitable only grew. He had to play along, to feign acceptance, to survive another dawn in this frightening, surreal existence. As she prepared to deliver the next meal, he wondered how many times he would be reborn into this nightmare before he found a way out, or was swallowed entirely into the darkness that lurked within this strange, terrible world. In the depths of her mind, she sensed that her exceptional talent was her greatest asset, a gift she could harness to its full extent. She believed that her brilliance could unlock unparalleled opportunities, transforming her life and the world around her. Yet, despite her confidence and ambition, her journey proved to be fraught with unforeseen pitfalls that ultimately led her down a path of relentless struggle. She wanted to grasp control over her destiny, to seize every moment with unwavering determination. But life had a different plan. Instead of the triumphs she envisioned, she found herself repeatedly confronting disappointment. No matter how hard she pushed, she seemed unable to escape the shadows of failure. Her hunger for success motivated her to keep trying, relentless in her pursuit. Yet each attempt ended in emptiness. Her mouth, once eager to savor victories, was left dry and unfulfilled, her aspirations slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. Time and again, she endured setbacks, marking a series of unfortunate events that felt like deaths. 13 times she descended into darkness, each time resurrected with a strange remnant of her former self, a fragment of memory imbued with the essence of her previous life. With each rebirth, she began to piece together the contours of this unfamiliar world, noting how radically it differed from her own. It was a realm born of bizarre stories, twisted realities, where the line between the extraordinary and the terrifying blurred. On her 18th revival, an unsettling thought crept into her mind. She wondered about the purpose of her recurring resurrections. Why did she keep returning? Who had authored these words, scarlet-stained messages that marked her existence? And why did they vanish the moment she tried to understand them? These questions haunted her. The words seemed to carry secrets, cryptic and blood-written, that disappeared before she could grasp their meaning. Once again, her eyes fluttered open, revealing her surroundings. The familiar act of awakening, yet nothing about her situation seemed normal. Her mind lingered in confusion and suspicion. She could sense that she was caught in a cycle, a web spun by unseen hands. She was aware that she did not truly know her own identity. But she was certain of one truth. Her wife was intricately involved in her torment. The woman was no less than a monster, a creature whose true nature was hidden beneath a veneer of normalcy. Tortured by this realization, she found herself repeatedly pronouncing that her wife ought to die, an act driven by a desperate desire to be free, believing she deserved to live more than her tormentor. Her mind wandered back and forth, filled with fury and longing for vengeance. Meanwhile, her wife entered the scene, calling out affectionately as she entered the kitchen to prepare breakfast. She stood there, knowing full well that this routine was thrashed with falsehood, yet dutifully played her part. Her wife extended an offer, hot, moist meat, an invitation to start the day. He approached her deliberately, expectant but cautious, yet as was often the case, he chose to ignore her overture, passing by without physical contact. She, standing in the doorway, asked if he wanted to begin his morning with some warm, succulent meat. He moved closer, intent on the meal she had claimed was ready, but he sensed her deception. Her words misled him, for the breakfast was merely pretend. She acted as if everything was prepared, yet he knew better. He took a small snack, a makeshift morsel he could bite into, knowing full well that stepping outside the confines of the room was the only way to uncover what was truly happening. As he bit into the snack, he saw her vanish into the floor, a surreal transformation that left him questioning the boundaries of reality. He reached the door, prepared to escape this nightmare, aware that his only chance of liberation was to leave this space and confront the chaos outside. His hand found the doorknob, cold and unyielding, while she remained visible in the reflection, an ominous presence lurking behind the door. She demanded to know where he was going and why he refused to stay with her. But instead of engaging, he simply opened the door and stepped out, whispering to himself that no one could kill him 18 times and get away with it. Not anymore. He was determined to seek vengeance once and for all. Finding a way to eliminate her, he promised himself, would be his objective. The moment he succeeded, he vowed to return and end her reign of terror. Yet, as he opened the apartment door anew, a strange sight arrested his attention. The sky was painted in unsettling shades of red, and an array of distorted creatures crowded the world outside. Shadows of humans hid behind buildings, their figures eerily vague. And ominous, I watched him from afar, while a giant rabbit clad in a flowing cape trotted by. A mixture of fear and fascination took hold of him, and he began to laugh. A maniacal, almost psychopathic laughter, finding the world around him bizarrely captivating. Suddenly, a strange sensation overtook him, and he retched onto the sidewalk. Just then, a girl appeared out of nowhere, asking if he was okay. She looked at him with innocent curiosity, seeking to understand if he was unwell. He responded calmly, claiming he was fine and could be called Big Brother. As he patted her head, a fleeting thought crossed his mind. How adorable she was, and how he wished he could have a daughter like her. But her face twisted in an instant, transforming into a monstrous demon wielding a massive sword. Her form grew larger, terrifying, and incomprehensible. He was left speechless, standing frozen in terror. But soon, an uncontrollable laughter erupted from him, a wild, carefree sound. He reveled in the chaos, announcing that this world fascinated him, absolutely captivated by its strangeness. He admitted that he liked her new monstrous appearance because it was easier for him to kill her without guilt. The thought of ending all these bizarre creatures, these weirdos, without remorse, delighted him. He felt a sense of liberation in his darkness. But this victory was an illusion. Once more, he was torn apart. His body ruptured into fragments, loss and pain overwhelming him. Consciousness faded, and he found himself waking up in bed, his wife beside him, holding balloons. She gently asked if he was all right. The morning sun streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on the room. He reflected on how exhausting it was to have breakfast 20 times in a single day, an endless cycle of routine and futility. Soon after, he was seated on a bench in the park, the quietness offering him a moment of peace amid the madness. Once again, a girl approached, her innocent face full of concern. She asked where her mother was and if he could take her home. He sat there, contemplating the insanity of this place, the surrealities and the unexplainable behaviors that surrounded him. This world was a place of chaos, filled with creatures and individuals exhibiting irrational, often aggressive behaviors, yet none of their actions had real impact on him. He observed one such man, completely irrational and hostile, yet powerless. Others appeared identical to humans but behaved strangely. They would approach him, their expressions eager, only to retreat at the slightest reaction. It was as if they sought connection but were bound by some unseen force. Even the normal-looking humans remained hidden, unseen by most, yet they clung to their vulnerability, driven perhaps by a desire to merge with the world or to understand it. Later, he held his phone, receiving a trivial payment, less than a dime, in this strange universe. It was barely enough to survive, yet it was a start. He needed more resources to grasp the secrets of this place, to uncover the truth behind its distortions. He was part of a working group, where a young man named Wuda called him. He was known as Jizu Fanu, a seller of properties for a company that seemed familiar yet fundamentally broken. His sense of frustration grew as he realized he had not received his commission for a recent sale. Determined, he sent a message to resolve the issue and jumped on his bicycle to investigate. Arriving at the designated location, he was struck with disbelief. The building he sought was replaced by a dilapidated hospital, abandoned and ominous. Cold sweat formed on his brow as he wondered if this was the supposed sales office. Standing at the door, he hesitated, questioning whether this was indeed the place where transactions occurred. His phone rang. An unfamiliar voice asked if he was on his way and if everyone was at the office. He responded cautiously, confirming their presence and noting that the owner's son had made multiple attempts to contact him without success. He reassured himself that he would go upstairs and see for himself. The atmosphere of the building was undeniably affected by some disturbing reality. Yet, the voices on the call did not seem agitated or abnormal, which puzzled him further. Intrigued, he moved down a corridor and suddenly collided with something soft. He wondered what it could be. A gentle, elusive something that fleetingly touched him. He reached out with his hand, curious to find the limitations of his surroundings. What he encountered were not tangible objects but two magic orbs, glowing spheres capable of foreseeing a promising future. A sly, mischievous grin spread across his face as he felt a strange warmth growing inside him. Suddenly, a slap struck his cheek, snapping him out of his trance. A girl appeared screaming, accusing him of something he couldn't understand. He looked up, calling out the name of the institution, Bailu, before everything blurred and shifted once more. In that moment, the environment reverted again to the abandoned hospital. He stretched his hand toward a nearby wall, trying to grasp the fragile threads of reality, uncertain of what awaited him next. In a realm beyond ordinary perception, where the boundaries of reality blur and distort, a figure found himself inexplicably immersed in a strange and haunting landscape. His hand, outstretched and trembling, brushed through a mass that appeared solid yet eluded tangible interaction. It was as if the creature was composed of a material that defied physical laws, requiring specific conditions to manifest or be felt. Again, he attempted to pass his hand through the apparition. This time, he observed that it disappeared upon contact, slipping through as if it were merely a vapor or an illusion. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and the environment around him shifted. He found himself in a desolate corridor, abandoned and eerily silent, stretching into darkness with patches of flickering, dim light. He surveyed several rooms, each one completely empty, their doors ajar or closed, but devoid of any life. A peculiar, pungent smell caught his attention. An unmistakable hint of blood lingered in the air near one door. With cautious hesitation, he tried once more to penetrate the barrier, but the entity resisted, pushing him back into the hallway. Driven by curiosity and a shattering sense of unease, he finally entered a room that seemed to be a hideout for a suffering soul. A girl curled on the floor, tears streaking her face as she sobbed quietly. He continued to observe, her fragile figure trembling with sorrow. Suddenly, she sensed his presence and started to rise. Her eyes, wide and pleading, turned to him in recognition. "Brother," she whispered softly, voice trembling with vulnerability. But he, resistant and detached, ignored her, passing through the walls and leaving her behind. Her cry echoed faintly as he moved forward. As he stepped into the next space, a new figure materialized. A creature, grotesque and unsettling, blocking his way. Yet, strangely, he pressed on, walking despite the apparent threat. The beast seemed momentarily confused, as if uncertain of its purpose. The surroundings remained increasingly bizarre. Dozens of strange shapes and objects cluttered every corner, each more perplexing than the last. Some rooms were open in a way that suggested an escape route, whispers of freedom promising yet unobtainable. All the while, the man felt increasingly detached, his reactions dulled, perhaps thanks to the actions of his wife. She had, in inexplicable moments, metaphorically killed him, symbolically ending his life 18 times. Yet he endured, unshaken. Suddenly, on the ground in front of him, he noticed scattered papers. Their words spoke of experiment number 128, a record of a transformation, a process ripping through the fabric of their seemingly physical reality. He stooped to pick them up, pondering whether all those who had undergone such changes were truly human. But before he could delve deeper into the pages, he realized he couldn't turn them over. The words seemed to belong to another world entirely. Without warning, something passed through his body, jolting him upright. It was a tendril of hair, the long, dark strand of a monstrous creature hanging from the ceiling. She descended gracefully, her face emerging into view, and asked pointedly why he was there. Was he seeking answers, maybe yearning to uncover the secrets of life itself? He ignored her, choosing instead to consider his next move. His thoughts drifted toward the building's core, the director's office. The structure was once a psychiatric hospital, but to him, it felt more like a labyrinth of memories and forgotten truths. It was the same building where the previous owner, perhaps once a businessman, had operated what was now a relic of despair. The old staff rooms and administrative offices had been abandoned long ago. He decided to ascend the staircase, hoping to find something buried within the shadows of the upper floors. As he moved along the corridor, a voice suddenly echoed, calling him by name. "Brother Shu!" Startled, he turned to find a chubby young man shouting at him, furious and bewildered. "How dare you come here to work? You've already been fired," the boy bellowed. Without hesitation, the protagonist pushed past the boy, dismissing him and the others lingering nearby, convinced that this floor held no more secrets or threats. The boy with glasses looked confused, and the man's superior, an authoritative figure, began berating him, questioning why he had ascended to the second floor. The director's former office was supposed to be empty, yet here he was, steadily approaching the door. His hand hovered over the doorknob, the faint sound of others protesting behind him, urging him to stop. But he was already committed to entering. Inside, the room was tense, filled with a palpable sense of foreboding. Someone shouted to halt, but he ignored the warning, throwing open the door and stepping inside. The scene beyond was grotesque. A limb stretched out before him, a body half deformed, crushed and mangled beyond recognition. He saw the mutilated figure's torso, the grisly details of a colleague being forcibly torn apart, leaving only fragments behind. Questions erupted among the onlookers. Who was this figure? What was he doing here in the midst of chaos? Without warning, he seized a nearby arm, wrenching it roughly, while a woman behind him demanded he release her. "Let me go," she pleaded, struggling against his grip. He responded coldly, dismissing her concerns and tossing her aside, proclaiming her too noisy and disruptive. She fell to the ground, and a young boy tried to help her, paralyzed by fear and helplessness. Meanwhile, his gaze fell upon a sheet of paper resting on a desk. The message inscribed there confirmed that secrets lay hidden within this institution. It spoke of a specific room, 5200, where the truth awaited the brave or the reckless. He wondered whether the note was meant for him and felt an unexplainable pull to find out more. Why had they known he would come? As he moved toward the designated room, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The overhead lamp exploded into a shower of sparks, plunging the corridor into darkness. The boy with glasses followed closely, nerves fraying. The others, trembling, hesitated, unsure whether use of their phones provided enough light or if they should abandon their search altogether. Suddenly, the scene transformed. The sterile, oppressive hospital environment dissolved, revealing instead an old, abandoned factory, an echo of a past life. An eerie, oppressive silence filled the space, broken only by their frightened whispers. Some of the staff members remained, their faces etched with worry about their unfinished tasks, their lingering fears of having failed to deliver the promised service. A security guard, noticing the strange atmosphere, ventured closer, opening a flashlight. Its weak beam cast long, ghostly shadows across the dilapidated walls. A young woman crouched to retrieve her phone, trying to turn on its tiny flashlight, but lamented that it was too weak to illuminate much. He turned on his own device, questioning the boy with glasses about his feeble light, but in that moment, a realization dawned. They were no longer in the psychiatric hospital. They now stood within an archaic corporate building, long since deserted and abandoned to the passage of time. The young man, whose face displayed a mischievous grin, demanded the phone of the chubby boy, only to discover that there was no signal. He reassured him that, given his status, he had access to resources beyond their understanding, power and knowledge that transcended normal limits. All clues pointed toward an extraordinary truth. They had entered a strange, alternate dimension. What had once been a normal, thriving reality had morphed into a fractured, surreal landscape, plagued with anomalies and distortions. The remaining staff, still visibly anxious, showed concern about whether they could fulfill their responsibilities in this unsettling new world. One of the guards, alarmed, questioned whether everything was all right and decided to investigate further. Meanwhile, a young girl bent down to pick up her phone and shone her weak flashlight. She remarked on how feeble the illumination was, prompting the protagonist to turn on his own device and question the boy with glasses as to why his light was so dim. The group, still shaken, wondered aloud about the strange occurrence, how they had somehow found themselves in what seemed a fractured, haunted version of their reality. In that instant, the boy with glasses lost his composure, raising his voice to demand silence. The panic that overtook him was genuine. He insisted that everyone stay calm. "We must remain calm," he said forcefully. "That's the only way we can survive." The tense silence in the group deepened as everyone stared at him, uncertain whether his outburst was a sign of strength or a breakdown. He explained, in simple terms, that they had entered a world filled with ghosts, a realm of shadows and echoes, an alternate dimension where beings of pure energy and malevolence dwelled. This world had no rules, or rather, its rules were only known to those who had survived long enough to understand them. He warned that, if they violated even the smallest law of this ghostly realm, they risked being killed or forever trapped there. The boy with the youthful, chubby face, visibly trembling, asked what their next move should be. His voice quivered with fear as he posed the question. The protagonist, despite sweating profusely, answered that the immediate priority was to find a way out, an exit, before their time ran out, before the dimension claimed them all. Suddenly, an ominous sound echoed behind him, something faint yet familiar. Recognizing the sound, he instinctively warned his companions that a ghost was approaching. The group dismissed his warnings, suggesting it was only his imagination or panic. But as they argued, things rapidly grew more dangerous. Out of nowhere, a girl's hair was grabbed violently, yanked by unseen hands, and she cried out in terror. The others watched in horror as her scream was cut short, the captor's grip relentless. The man saw everyone panicking and shouted again for calm, insisting that they stayed together. The boy with glasses shrieked, his voice trembling, "Ali, she's gone." The scene was chaotic, with movement and shadows swirling in the darkness. In that moment, the others realized that their surroundings had shifted into a nightmare landscape, where fear, violence, and uncertainty reigned supreme. They were trapped in a place where the usual laws of physics and life no longer applied, and survival depended solely on their ability to remain calm, observant, and cautious as they navigated the horrifying unknown. In a realm shrouded in darkness and shadows, a moment of peril had suddenly erupted among a group of friends trapped in an ominous maze. A young woman, whose presence seemed to be tethered to the sinister atmosphere, found herself standing just beside one of her companions. Her sudden movement, almost instinctive, signaled her attempt to distance herself from unseen threats lurking nearby. Frantically, she began dialing her friend's number, hoping to find some form of reassurance or counsel amid the chaos. In the midst of this tense situation, a figure named Yuten turned to the protagonist and a voice trembling with urgency asked if he had seen any apparition, any flicker of a ghostly form. Regret shadowed his answer, for he had failed to witness the spectral figure's fleeting appearance. The girl had vanished without warning, as if swallowed by the night itself. To the others, the air was thick with doubt, suspicion creeping into their minds about the very nature of their unseen adversary. Some murmured that the entity might be a manifestation of the spiritual realm, an unpredictable force acting under its own whims. Yutong, one of the group's more perceptive individuals, observed that the girl, despite her sudden disappearance, seemed unafraid. His curiosity deepened. Perhaps she was a master of spiritual manipulation, a rare person capable of influencing spirits, or perhaps she was merely fearless out of ignorance. The question lingered. What was her true role? Was she merely an innocent victim or something more powerful? The protagonist took a moment to clarify what a spiritual master was. An individual who could harness and control their inner spiritual energy. Such mastery was no common skill. It required discipline, awareness, and an intimate connection to unseen energies. In this treacherous environment, mastery over one's spiritual forces could be the key to survival. Fan Shu, another member of the group, voiced a question that reflected a curiosity rooted in fear and hope alike. Seeing the potential in this knowledge, he wondered if becoming a spiritual master was a skill that could be learned within the strange realm they found themselves in. If so, he was eager to discover how such mastery could be achieved, believing that understanding this could be their ticket out of danger. Fan Shu's demeanor was marked by confidence, an almost unnatural calmness that raised suspicion. His tranquility suggested he might hold vital clues or even be a crucial figure in their escape. The others watched him closely as he explained that to exit this ghostly domain, they would need to gather the power of the spirits, or more precisely, their essence. But doing so was no simple matter. It demanded the fulfillment of two critical conditions simultaneously. First, they would have to confront their deepest fears, engulfed in a moment that mimicked a trauma so intense that it blurred the line between life and death. This emotional ordeal was designed to break their resolve, forcing them to confront their darkest secrets and fears. Second, they had to establish contact with a ghost, allowing its spectral energy to permeate their very soul, empowering them to harness its strength. Yet, Fan Shu warned, this was a perilous process. Ghostly power was as staining as a bloodied garment. While it could hide beneath the surface, it also left a mark, a stain that could corrupt the soul if one was not cautious. This revelation made Fan Shu, one of the younger members of the group, reflect deeply. He was acutely aware that after experiencing multiple deaths, they had learned to avoid contact with ghosts out of self-preservation. He viewed every intangible apparition and illusion as mere mirages, avoiding engagement to prevent his own demise. To him, the ghosts only posed a threat when they crossed into the physical realm. Once in the material world, they could kill without ever being seen, invisible killers lurking in shadows. Could they, then, establish a link with such spirits? If so, might they have the means to eradicate these deadly phantoms once and for all? Fan Shu, pondering this, wondered whether interfering with the spirits was inherently dangerous, or perhaps their only chance to eliminate the threat. In contemplating this, Fan Shu's thoughts turned to his wife, his loved one whom he believed might be lost forever. Driven by a desire to master these spiritual forces, he contemplated becoming a master himself, to confront and end the ghostly menace that haunted their surroundings, and possibly to rescue her. The desire for vengeance or salvation burned brightly within him. Suddenly, the presence of another individual flickered out of existence, triggering chaos among the remaining friends. Tang, overwhelmed by fear, started frantically shouting at everyone to quiet down or risk attracting more spirits. A desperate plea for silence in the face of impending doom. Meanwhile, Fafa approached camp cautiously, her expression filled with apprehension. She asked what their next move would be, visibly trembling at the thought of disappearing into the unknown. Fan Shu, sensing the gravity of the moment, replied that they had only a limited amount of time, exactly 3 minutes for the men and 2 for the women, to act before another member vanished into the abyss. The vague but deadly countdown was confirmed when their guardian figure disappeared precisely after 3 minutes, followed 2 minutes later by another. This clearly indicated that the spirits consumed their victims in an exact duration. 2 minutes for females and 3 for males, the details calculated according to the ghostly appetites. Time was rapidly running out. One of the friends started to leave, perhaps attempting to escape the inevitable or confronting despair. When asked where he was heading, he simply said he was trying to find a way out, perhaps even to sacrifice himself to buy others more time. Fan Shu, ever pragmatic, urged the group to begin searching for a solution, warning that unless they acted quickly, they would all perish trapped within this malevolent space. Tao, another member, suddenly pointed and commanded everyone to stay put. He insisted that no one should try to leave, asserting with certainty that no one would escape this place alive if they moved. His voice was firm, even grim, an expression of the hopelessness that clouded their situation. However, the protagonist dismissed Tao's authority, confident that their numbers, 8 individuals, would be reduced to none in less than 20 minutes unless they found a way to break the cycle. Fan Shu looked over his shoulder with sharp eyes, warning that anyone attempting to interfere or escape would be met with deadly consequences. His caution stemmed from the understanding that venturing into the corridors now was perilous. Ghosts prowled the shadows, lurking and waiting. The darkened hallways were an arena of unseen horror, and any step off the safe path could prove fatal. Meanwhile, their observation skills became crucial. They realized they were back in the hospital. An unsettling recognition dawned on them. The environment now bore the signs of their previous surroundings. The hallways were smeared with blood, the floors stained and slick with a sinister fluid. They noted the uniforms discarded along the corridor, the same attire they had seen earlier, now soaked with the dark, drying substance. Fan should deduce that the spectral entities had a pattern. The time it took for the ghosts to consume their victims was directly related to the victim's gender. Females, he explained, took precisely 2 minutes to be devoured, while males required 3. The timing, he reasoned, was not arbitrary but connected to the ghosts' feeding habits. This insight suggested that they still possessed some fleeting moments, a window of opportunity, but that it was narrowing rapidly. Looking around, the group saw signs of ongoing carnage. Bloody streaks on the walls and torn garments indicated violence and struggle. The presence of sharp implements, small blades and scalpel-like tools, suggested that the entities were highly skilled, perhaps practicing for their grotesque acts. The fact that only one such implement was found indicated that these ghosts were not mere remnants of the departed but entities with intent and mastery. Above, something unnatural caught their attention. From the ceiling, a shadow or movement appeared, the only figure that seemed to move freely in this chaos. It was the Dr. Ghost, a haunting semblance of the same medical professional they had encountered earlier, now suspended above them. Its spectral form hovered ominously, gazing downward with an unsettling intelligence. They listened intently for any unnatural sounds emanating from its direction, the faint scuffling or whispers that might reveal its next move. When they looked up, they saw the group of their companions from the past moments, now appearing as desperate figures approaching. Their faces were etched with worry and urgency, seeking answers, searching for a way out. The group hesitated, feeling the weight of their combined fears. The young, round-faced member asked if they had found anything useful in their descent. The answer was met with blood-curdling screams and cries of alarm. They reported an overwhelming presence of blood, the walls soaked in crimson, evidence of the carnage that was unfolding. All recognized the bloodied attire as belonging to their erstwhile allies, murdered by unseen forces. Yen, trembling with fear, asked whether all had been consumed, whether anyone had survived the onslaught. The concern deepened when it became clear that the spirits, the ghosts, had fully devoured their victims. It seemed that the spectral predators roamed freely, hunting relentlessly within these cursed corridors. Besieged by the mounting horror, the group's resolve was tested anew. Fifei, the most vulnerable among them, begged to escape, her voice trembling with terror and desperation. It was clear they must flee immediately, but the question remained, where could they run? The ghosts were too numerous and too powerful to confront directly. Fan Shu, the calm and determined, refused to give in to despair. Yet he knew they couldn't linger. They needed a plan, a way to turn the tide, something that would allow them to survive. As the reality set in that their time might be running out, the ghostly presence above them grew closer, ominous shadows descending from the ceiling. Suddenly, amidst their discussions and fears, a figure with flowing hair descended, making a slow and haunting approach. The spectral doctor, their perpetual pursuer, came nearer. His gaze was cold, calculating. The group, realizing the immediate threat, began to run, desperately trying to escape the grasp of the looming apparition. They shouted at the monster to stay away, to leave them be, but their words fell on deaf ears. In the chaos, a young, frightened girl, Feifei, was caught by the creature. She was torn from her friend's grasp, her screams echoing as the monster clutching her by the hair dragged her deeper into the darkness. Desperation turned to panic. Some tried to hold her back, but the ghost's grip was unyielding. At that moment, a furious man, perhaps overwhelmed by rage and fear, slapped the girl, trying to shake her free from the grasp. The monster's relentless grip tightened. Feifei's pleas for mercy went unheard as tears streamed down her face. She begged not to be abandoned, her voice filled with despair. Amidst the blood and shadows, the creature sustained her, suspending her helplessly. Darkness and blood filled the scene, an unthinkable horror unfolding before their eyes. The group was frozen, witnesses to the brutality, aching with a mixture of horror and helplessness, as the ghost relentlessly assaulted Feifei multiple times. The ghostly doctor's techniques were eerily precise, swift, and practiced, clear evidence of many past interactions or perhaps countless repetitions of this gruesome act. Its familiarity with surgical tools was unmistakable, indicating that it might have once been a skilled medic, now turned into an instrument of death. The scene was gruesome and surreal, an unending nightmare that seemed to consume everything and everyone in its path. In the darkness of the abandoned hospital, an eerie silence hung thick in the stale air, broken only by the muffled sounds of distant footsteps and the faint whispers of unseen terrors. The creature, a spectral entity draped in shadows and flickering like a dying candle, moved with unsettling purpose, its presence both predatory and ghostly. Its eyes glowed faintly, casting an ominous light on the surrounding debris, while its hand clutching the scalpel reflected a sinister sheen. Despite its grim demeanor, the creature appeared unfocused, seemingly indifferent to the chaos surrounding it. The bewildered observer, a young man named Fan Shu, watched with trepidation, perceiving that the beast's apparent disinterest only heightened its danger. For 2 surgeries having been performed simultaneously, which was nearly impossible, the monster's attention seemed oddly diverted. As the monster parted its lips to feast, the ghostly face of Feifei flashed in Fan Shu's mind. A realization dawned. This insatiable hunger for human flesh was no longer driven by instinct but was a facet of its cursed existence, a consequence of its transformation into a ghost. Fan Shu sensed that courage was the only way to survive this nightmare. Slowly, tentatively, he began to approach the creature. His heart hammered in his chest, but he understood that his instinct to face the danger was vital. Meanwhile, his friend, eager but cautious, called out urgently, warning him that they had to escape immediately. Yet, Fan Shu hesitated. He reasoned that the monster only murdered one person at a time. When it was eating, that moment became the safest window to act or flee, because the creature's focus was entirely on its meal. His friend argued that the beast would soon be finished, but Fan Shu noticed something peculiar. Feifei had left behind a piece of round, raw meat, probably to delay its complete consumption and buy some extra moments. This seemingly minor detail could make a difference in their escape. Hearing this, his friend involuntarily retched, overwhelmed by the horror unfolding before them. Fan Shu remembered that the key to survival was to absorb energy from these encounters. In a realm teeming with ghosts, the energy was intensely concentrated, making physical contact the most effective strategy. He carefully examined the ghost's thighs, gently palming them to assess infection or damage. Strangely, he observed that the spectral creature's legs were inverted, twisted in unnatural ways. Fan Shu reached out and palmed the limbs again, noting the abnormality. His friend, alarmed, shouted for him to wake up. The situation was perilous, and this was not the time for distractions. Nevertheless, Fan Shu only responded that if he was afraid, he could run away, but he would stay and face it. The young man's courage seemed to grow, transforming his outlook from terror to a cautious readiness. His friend suggested that they act swiftly, tightening the group's resolve. Fan Shu moved toward the ghost's legs, trying to determine if physical contact was safe. The icy feel of the spectral limbs sent shivers through him as he continued, risking touch to gather vital intel. The friend observed that the situation hadn't changed in the slightest, and Feifei remarked that they would continue their efforts regardless. They exchanged tense glances, admitting that encountering a ghost or a phantom for the first time was a daunting experience. And these legs, unnaturally elongated, only added to the uncanny dread. A flicker of hope sparked within Fan Shu as he considered that this companion might possess hidden abilities. Perhaps, once terrified to death, he no longer felt that fear now that he had shifted into a more determined state. Time was passing. 1 minute had elapsed since the encounter began. They calculated that they could only withstand 30 more seconds of the ghost's interference before they would need to flee immediately. When the timer on his cell phone struck the mark of 1:30, Fan Shu signaled that it was time to run. His friend, anxious but resigned, asked if they could truly escape, and Fan Shu nodded, affirming that the terrain's features could be leveraged for their advantage. They had studied the hospital's layout during their previous explorations and hoped to use the environment to create distance from the pursuing monster. Suddenly, from ahead, a lock of hair appeared, blocking the path. Fan Shu wondered if their calculations had been off or if the quick disappearance of Feifei's flesh indicated the ghost had finished its meal sooner than expected. His gaze then fell to the ground, where he spotted 2 silicone implants, falsities crafted from synthetic material, placed in the debris, evidence of the ghost's imitation of flesh and bone. It dawned on him that everything they saw or heard could be illusions, an elaborate deception. Just then, the spectral creature materialized directly behind him. With a swift, precise cut, it sliced through his neck. Darkness engulfed the screen as the boy's head tumbled through the air, crimson pooling around the severed shoulders. His consciousness faded into oblivion. Moments later, he reopened his eyes, only to find himself back in the same grim corridor, face to face with the very same monster. The eerie chill that once haunted the scene lingered, yet Fan Shu understood that these fleeting temporal shifts might be part of a deeper, more complex game, possibly like a test with stages and checkpoints. His friend's voice echoed, remarking on how cold it was in this nightmare realm, and Fan Shu was struck with a realization. These temporal distortions perhaps depended on specific events. Maybe, much like in a game, progress was saved at certain junctures, allowing for reattempts and strategic planning. The notion that they could exploit these pauses or resets excited him. His friend, curious and skeptical, questioned what their next move might be, while Fan Shu pondered whether praying or invoking spiritual powers could provide them an advantage. He was especially interested in identifying clues nestled within the environment that could reveal an escape route. While others hesitated or doubted, Fan Shu made the decision to attempt activating his latent abilities. He clasped his hands, trying to focus and summon the vision or energy needed to see beyond the material illusions. His hope was that his previous experience had given him enough mastery to unlock this new power. The group watched in a mixture of confusion and anticipation, unsure whether their efforts would be enough to break free from the nightmare. Inspired by Fan Shu's quiet determination, they began to follow his lead, mimicking the gestures and mental focus he demonstrated. Ever so attentive, Fan Shu observed the layout of the corridors once more. The exits, as he recalled, were situated on the right-hand side, hidden behind walls or concealed by structure. This detail strengthened his resolve. With this knowledge, they could navigate more strategically. Some members of the group voiced their intentions, while others hesitated, uncertain whether prayer or a spiritual invocation would turn the tide. Fan Shu was more interested in practical clues, hidden passages, objects, symbols that might signal a way out. Deep in thought, Fan Shu was also aware of the presence of the monster's influence, that they must be wary of false pathways designed to trap and confuse them. He remembered how in their previous encounters, the creature had created illusions, casting doubt on each step they took. They had to stay vigilant to discern real from fake. The group began to search the environment, tossing aside loose objects, debris, even spare items from their pockets to mark safe paths, creating trail markers that could serve as guides in the chaos. Slowly, they descended down the stairs, their movements hurried but deliberate. As they moved deeper into the labyrinthine structure, they found familiar items. Old coins, broken bottles, discarded clothing, all of which reassured them that they were retracing their steps or following clues meant for their escape. Fan Shu, amid this chaos, focused his attention on a tiny fragment, perhaps a piece of clothing or a small object of significance, that caught his eye. It was a shirt, perhaps of Feifei, that seemed out of place amid the debris. Suddenly, a shout rang out. Another member, Tan, raised his voice in alarm, proclaiming that only a spiritualist or someone with special sight could interpret the environment properly. He instructed everyone to activate their spiritual awareness, to focus their inner sight and see beyond the surface illusions. They all joined hands, closing their eyes or concentrating hard, trying to sense whether the environment revealed a true escape route or a trap. Some hesitated, unsure if their efforts would be successful, but others, like Fan Shu, believed that mental focus could tilt the odds in their favor. He hoped that their collective attempt to awaken latent spiritual senses would reveal a hidden passage or an exit that was otherwise concealed. Amid these tense preparations, Fan Shu remembered the emphasis on strategic movement, how the hallways seemed to favor certain directions, particularly the right side, based on previous observations. He pondered whether this trial was akin to a puzzle, requiring patience, intuition, and faith. As he visualized the layout, he questioned whether praying or summoning divine aid could open a portal or momentarily disable the ghost's influence. Some members had begun to recite silent prayers, while others looked for symbols inscribed on the walls or strange markings that might serve as clues. Meanwhile, Fan Shu kept his gaze fixed on the staircase ahead, recalling that the exits or safe zones were located to the right. His mind searched for any signs, any disturbance in the environment that could lead them to safety. He remembered how past experiences indicated that these corridors could shift or deceive, and so he urged everyone to be cautious. The group moved quickly yet carefully, throwing objects or marking walls as they went. They knew that with each step, they had to be alert for illusions or illusions crafted by the monster, a deception designed to trap or mislead. In moments of silence, Fan Shu thought about his own progress. The previous encounter with the spectral creature had revealed to him the importance of awareness, how even the smallest detail could be the key to survival. He realized that the fleeting nature of their situation meant they needed to act decisively when opportunities arose. Patience, observation, and quick reflexes would determine their fate. Perhaps, when the moment was right, he could harness his inner strength to manifest a power capable of dispelling the illusions or revealing the true path. The group pressed on, their footsteps echoing in the hollow corridors, each member lost in their thoughts, yet united by a shared desire to escape. The ghostly presence loomed intermittently, manifesting as fleeting shadows or distant sounds, testing their resolve at every turn. Fan Shu, resolute, pushed forward, trusting in the accumulated knowledge and the strange sensations he was beginning to experience. He knew that in this labyrinth of darkness and deception, only vigilance and faith could lead them out. Once upon a time, in a world where shadows lingered and unseen threats lurked around every corner, a group of explorers found themselves immersed in a perilous quest that would test their courage, wit, and resolve. Their journey was fraught with danger, and their every step brought them closer to the brink of despair. Amidst this chaos, a strange door appeared suddenly before them, shrouded in an aura of ominous mystery. It seemed to beckon them with an unsettling magnetism, whispering secrets of escape and salvation. As the group approached the mysterious portal, one of them, a vigilant young man, stepped forward with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Recognizing the significance of the door, he began inspecting it meticulously. With an intuitive sense of where the lock should be, he reached out and moved his hand through empty air, only to find that an unseen mechanism responded to his touch. Suddenly, the door swung open slowly, revealing an intense surge of energy emanating from within. A formidable, spectral force burst forth like a fanventus, an avatar of chaos and power that threatened to consume everything in its path. Just as the spectral entity materialized and prepared to enter the world of the living, another member of the group, a courageous young woman named Tang, tried to be the first to cross the threshold. However, fate had other plans. She collided unexpectedly with a figure emerging from the chaos, causing her to stumble backwards and shout that everyone had finally reached safety. Her voice was strained with relief, but her eyes betrayed her mounting panic. The others hurried past her, their desperate hopes focusing solely on escape. Amid the chaos, a seasoned observer named Fanshu watched with a calm demeanor. Curious as to why village elders and friends alike refused to move faster, Fanshu wondered aloud why the others continued to advance, seemingly unhurried by imminent danger. The response from the crowd was urgent, almost frantic. Their shouts echoed through the corridor, demanding that Fanshu reveal what he knew, especially now that the spectral menace loomed near. Fanshu, however, remained cold and detached. He knew that rushing headlong into the confrontation with the spectral force was pointless. When a stout, long-nosed man approached them, raising the threat of using the group as shields, Fanshu understood his adversary's sinister plan. It was a cruel ruse. By forcing someone into trapping the ghost, they hoped to either weaken it or provoke it into revealing a secret weakness. Fanshu's own plan was subtle. He wanted to see who would be caught, who would become the apparent victim, because that would cause the ghost to hesitate just long enough for him to gather more spiritual strength. Meanwhile, the fleeing crowd pressed onward, their footsteps echoing with desperation as they darted down twisted corridors and narrow passages. Suddenly, they reached a fork in the road, a divergence that split their path into two. This moment of choice created confusion and panic amongst the team members, each eager to push forward into what they believed was the safer route. Once again, Yen, a voice of reason amid chaos, asked Fanshu what should be done if he found the iron door, an ominous portal rumored to hold the answer to their predicament. Fanshu, however, hesitated. He was not particularly eager to offer help unless he saw an immediate benefit. The group's impatience grew, and their shouts became more insistent, urging him to speak quickly because the spectral presence was closing in. Fanshu, unconcerned, thought that fighting against the creature directly was pointless. To him, all those gathered around were mere tools, pieces to be used as pawns in a game they barely understood. At this moment, the ghostly entity, a spectral doctor, appeared to be invincible. Its formidable presence forced the group to realize that defeating it outright was an impossible task. Their only hope was to buy time, to draw out the enemy long enough for some to escape. Fanshu understood intuitively that sacrificing lives might be inevitable, that he might need to deliberately lure the ghost away by risking himself. The stakes were high. He knew he would have to enact a sacrificial act if they were to have any chance of salvation. As the group observed Fanshu stride toward the ghost, they felt a surge of dread. The plan was perilous, an orchestrated distraction that might cost many their lives. Fanshu's mind was resolute. He believed that if he could draw the spectral creature's attention, others could slip away unnoticed. His strategy was to create an opening, to delay the ghost long enough for a handful to reach safety. And thus, he prepared himself for the ultimate sacrifice. Suddenly, an obstacle appeared. Fanshu's movement was interrupted by a punch to the chest from Fanshu himself. An act of defiance or perhaps desperation, calling out that without him, none of them would be alive. The others, shocked and confused, did not understand his gambit. Fanshu yelled for help, urging them to assist, but in the chaos he was overpowered. Another individual, a fat young man with a prominent nose, lunged forward and attempted to restrain Fanshu, throwing him to the ground in a struggle that was frantic and tense. In the chaos, everything happened swiftly. The fat young man, desperate to survive, grabbed another member, a blonde youth, and, in a moment of madness, also locked him into a stranglehold. The scene was grim. The walls were stained with a dark, drying blood, reflecting the brutal reality of their fight. Seeing this atrocity, Fanshu realized with a grim certainty that the ghost's madness was akin to that of a soul lost to despair and insanity. Yet, he recognized that to beat the ghost, their spiritual strength had to be increased. The group, overwrought with fear and fury, watched helplessly. A question echoed through the chaos. What were they to do now? Once again, they faced the spectral menace, its form flickering with unnatural light. A close friend of the ghost, who was ill, approached with a twisted smile and a cruel jest. He remarked that a touch so cold and smooth was like ice, an ironic comment that belied the gravity of their situation. More usefully, the sick friend mused about the potential of awakening hidden spiritual powers. Perhaps, with a touch of poetic madness, some of them might discover within themselves the strength necessary to escape. After moments of frantic escape, the group found themselves running yet again. Hunger and thirst gnawed at them, exhaustion weighing heavily on their limbs. They entered a small cafe, an oasis amidst the chaos, to catch their breath. Inside, Tang began gathering supplies, distributing food as best as he could, trying to sustain their battered bodies. The fat young man approached, craving a share of the limited provisions during their winding escape route. Suddenly, a girl in the group announced that she had discovered an important clue, a door at the end of a corridor. Her voice was filled with hope, and the others hurried to her side, eager to believe in a way out. The man, anxious, told everyone to stay still. He approached the door cautiously, claiming they were finally saved. But as he pushed the door open, an ominous realization settled over them. The passage led to another door at the corridor's very end. Fanshu, always observant, noted that light here was weaker than before, darker, more oppressive. When they finally opened the door, it revealed a dull, insignificant storage room, a dead end. They had chosen the wrong path once again, and now they faced the harsh truth. To return, someone must sacrifice themselves. They would have to distract the ghostly doctor while others made a desperate escape. The protagonist, unable to accept inaction, turned back in search of the spectral presence. The others shouted and cursed, unsure of his reckless plan. Fanshu, standing apart, expressed a nonchalant attitude. He believed everyone should do what they thought best and refused to impose his will. Meanwhile, the fat young man vented his frustration, claiming that the choice had been made blindly, without understanding. He tried to rally the others, emphasizing that survival depended on strategic action. Their current challenge was to select a distraction, to create an opening, an opportunity for some to slip away unnoticed. Fanshu understood immediately. The ghost attacked one person at a time, resting for a brief 2 to 3 minutes between assaults. The group realized that their task was to choose someone who would serve as a decoy, someone whose sacrifice would enable others to escape. This plan was desperate but necessary. Fanshu thrust forward, calling out that if it weren't for him, none of them would be alive. His words were raw, filled with an unspoken plea for help. The others tried to intervene as he shouted for assistance. Suddenly, he was caught in a chokehold, his neck grasped by the fat young man, who was now acting out of panic. In the struggle, Fanshu was immobilized, the struggle intensifying as they fought desperately. In the chaos, another member, the fat young man, grabbed Fanshu's attacker and also put him into a chokehold. They crashed to the floor amid a whirlwind of violence. The moment was tense, filled with grim determination and fear. Then, without warning, the door behind them slammed shut with a deafening force. Fanshu was cut off from the outside world, isolated and helpless. The group, frightened and bewildered, tried to understand what was happening. Fanshu, with a strange calm, explained that he had never anticipated being so interested in other people. He noted with a strange, unsettling tone that humans could be more mysterious than ghosts. He thanked them for their curiosity but warned that next time, everyone would pay for their interference. With those ominous words, he fell to the ground, not dead, but mortally wounded. His last act was an eerie, hollow goodbye. As the others stared at his fallen body, they hesitated, realization dawning that their actions might have sealed their fate. They pushed open the door to escape, tears in their eyes, mourning the loss of their comrade. Suddenly, Fanshu's face appeared among shadows, smiling, a smile that froze their blood. Even in death, his expression was unnerving. A strange, sinister grin that seemed to hint at something far more terrifying than they had imagined. He whispered a single word, elegance, and then, with a blood-chilling chuckle, vanished into the darkness. His body, still smiling, served as a haunting reminder of the peril they faced. The group, trembling with fear, hurriedly descended the stairs, convinced that the ghost was still nearby, waiting for them to make a mistake. Yet, even as they ran, they couldn't shake the feeling that their nightmare was far from over, and the shadows continued to follow their every move, whispering secrets of further horrors to come. He knocked softly on the door and pushed it open without showing any fear. No one could understand how he managed to find it so quickly. They asked him if he had awakened his spiritual powers, but he simply ignored their questions and warned them that they had only a minute left before the ghost would appear. Seeing his calm attitude, they couldn't help but smile, remarking that it seemed he had indeed unlocked some mystical abilities. He offered to help them escape in exchange for a reward, 5 million units of currency. Fan Su merely smiled in response, saying there was no need to rush. He needed to settle a matter before leaving. Just as Tang was about to ask what he meant, Fan Su delivered a sharp knee to his abdomen. The boy cried out and collapsed onto the ground in pain. Fan Su scoffed, suggesting the funds could also be used to treat his suffering, which appeared quite desperate. He added that he could pay even more if asked, but now the situation was bleak. The others understood that they were running out of time. Yet, there was a strange feeling among them. What exactly did Fan Su mean by calling them saved? Suddenly, another hard strike landed, and now the chubby boy was writhing on the floor, clutching his side in agony. Fan Su sneered and said he should have died long ago. The group looked at one another, bewildered by his words. Was he losing his mind? Did he plan to do this to everyone? Fan Su clarified that he didn't intend to kill them, at least not yet. His strategy was more subtle. He explained that he needed at least one person alive to see his plan through. The others hesitated, unsure whether to trust his words. Fan Su pointed in a specific direction and asserted that they were running out of time. When they questioned his lack of leadership, he responded that he would simply stay behind to play a tune. This admitted a certain oddity, leaving the group perplexed. The villainous friend they called a psychopathic killer insisted he wanted to remain, choosing to stay behind and face the danger alone. As the spectral figure of the doctor reappeared, the entire group recoiled and sprinted away, but they halted behind a wall, covertly observing the unfolding events. From their vantage point, they saw the monster, an enormous specter, approach once again. Hannah, who was on the ground, begged desperately for someone to save him, but as he looked down, he realized his pants were soaked with blood. The blow from Fan Su had caused internal bleeding. He tried to scream, clutching his wounded leg, declaring that they would die together. Fan Su, however, stepped on his hand nonchalantly, warning him not to worry. He would stay right there watching him perish. Just then, the monster seized the boy by the neck, and in that moment Hannah was gone. The scene shifted to Fan Su's face, painted with scars and smudges, reflecting his madness. The man muttered that the taste of revenge wasn't so bad after all, yet a strange sensation crept into his chest. He questioned how it was possible for his heart to beat so rapidly. Suddenly, he heard his wife's voice calling his name. He thought it was incredible, an ironic thought, that he would long to see her dismembered as he had seen that other creature. Picking himself up, he moved cautiously toward the ghost, the specter of the doctor, while the others watched with curiosity. Their minds raced to understand his intentions. He fixed his gaze on Hannah, remembering that, at the moment of his death, the boy had called out to him for help. That memory prompted him to invite his friend to join him. However, Ao, the other, did not seem particularly eager. All the others called Fan Su a ghost, a specter. In that moment, Fan Su realized that having died more than 20 times, experiencing such chaos and madness had dulled his emotional responses. His humanity was fading gradually, transforming him into a cold, disconnected entity. His former self and Ao had become completely different, yet he saw no choice but to refrain from forcing his way forward. Suddenly, Ao spoke, revealing that he was the only person in the group he could trust fully. Since Ao was his true friend, he would trust his plan, even if it appeared terrifying, especially considering all the blood smeared across his face. Soon after, Ao approached Fan Su with a flushed face, activating more of his spiritual power as they prepared for the next phase of their ordeal. While the group was distracted and laughing nervously, Ao questioned why Fan Su had attacked those two earlier. Fan Su explained that, given the speed of the ghost, escape was impossible. When the ghost caught up, especially with those holding elevated positions, the others would be eliminated first. Then, Fan Su felt a strange chill, an inexplicable coldness that nuzzled closer to his body. He asked Ao if he also sensed it but was told it was normal, that everything was fine. Fan Su, keenly aware that it was not an illusion, recognized that this influence stemmed from the ghost's power. He observed that the connection was weak but approaching a critical point, a potential sign that he might begin to develop spiritual abilities. Motivated by this unusual phenomenon, Ao urged them to run, but Fan Su dismissed his concern, claiming everything was under control. The chubby boy, close by, was even smiling, considering that this news was quite reassuring. The boy then asked Fan Su how it felt to awaken to spiritual power, as he hadn't experienced anything yet. Fan Su speculated that what they lacked was a life-or-death situation to trigger the process. Their mental state hadn't yet reached the necessary threshold, which explained the absence of any sensations. Ao found this odd and wondered when Fan Su had gone through something similar. Watching the ghost lick the face of the chubby, Fan Su considered that this was a good sign. He calculated they had roughly 5 minutes to absorb as much energy as possible. Within this window, they could draw in the frigid energy invading Fan Su's body. He tried to sense its direction, initially feeling it moving toward his brain and heart, implying that they were turning into icy blocks. A chilling blade seemed to cut through his entire body, and after his form was shattered, a flash of light appeared in his chest. This flash condensed into a glowing red sphere. As Fan Su regained consciousness, he sensed his 5 senses had sharpened dramatically. His speed of thought and control over his body had increased as well. It was as if new parts of the world had become accessible to him. Yet, he realized that he had only awakened less than 1% of his potential spiritual power. His abilities appeared to be linked to the intensity of his desire. He wondered what that desire was. Suddenly, his chest throbbed painfully, and he agonized over the possibility that his power might be causing pain. The countless deaths he had endured had led him to a single, overwhelming craving to return to life. As the eerie sensation of impending doom grew heavier, an unsettling feeling of distortion took hold of his mind. Whether these were negative emotions, twisted thoughts, or pure pain, they had the power to make enemies experience everything suddenly and all at once. A faint smile crept across his face as a sense of exhilaration flooded him. With this newfound ability, he began to see himself in a different light, marveling at how his mind unraveled the chaos within. His eyes sparkled with madness as he laughed aloud, almost maniacally, basking in the thrill of his own power. In that moment of triumph, he turned to see whether the ability had truly taken effect. His friend Fan Su watched intently as Ao, lost in his own mental storm, announced that he had received the best skill possible for himself. Memories of his beloved wife floated through his mind, putting him into a trance. As Ao called him from behind, indicating that 2 minutes had passed since their last exchange, Fan Su simply instructed him to step aside, revealing his intent to test his power immediately. Taking a step back, Fan Su noted that the skill appeared to be functioning correctly, which filled him with a sense of purpose and hope. Moving closer to the ghostly figure, he focused his energy on his palm, aware of the experiences etched into his soul over the preceding days. He understood well that the more he faced death, the more pain he would endure. But within that pain lay the potential for strength, each resurrection making him stronger, more resilient. As long as he kept dying and re-emerging, he believed he could grow limitless in power. With a fierce determination, he struck the ghost in the face, proclaiming that he wanted her to feel what it was like to witness this masterpiece of destruction firsthand. The blow connected squarely, but the power seemed to momentarily dissipate. The ghost was pushed back, dropping her scalpel, tears welling in her eyes as she fell to the ground. Fan Su immediately realized that his attack had been weak, a shallow blow fueled by depleted spiritual energy. The strike failed to hurt her, and it appeared that she had not felt any pain, unlike the agony he had experienced. Reflecting on the situation, he understood that his current state of spiritual exhaustion rendered him largely ineffective. It was clear that mere brute force would not bring her down. Still, the desire for vengeance burned fiercely within him, and he pondered the possibility of fleeing before she could recover. Perhaps redirecting this energy into weaponry would prove more effective. Near his feet on the floor lay a makeshift weapon, a discarded tool that might serve his purpose. As he bent to pick it up, he was suddenly struck by an overwhelming surge of energy emanating from a nearby blade. The weapon looked impossible to lift. An immense spiritual force seemed embedded within it, attacking his core instantly. His mind flashed through memories of every time that weapon had been used, every moment of pain it had absorbed, a reservoir of suffering and resentment. As he stared at the blade, he wondered if he could harness that pain to finish the ghost, to eliminate her for good. Summoning his courage, he told Ao to step aside once more, preparing to confront the enemy head-on. He launched an attack aimed at the figure's neck, believing this to be the critical point of vulnerability. But the attack failed to land effectively. The ghost, unfazed, simply tugged at Fan Su's shirt and remarked that not even a scratch was left. Her tone was mocking, as if taunting him with her invincibility. Frustration blossomed in his chest as he watched her aggressive assault, pounding her fists against his back repeatedly. Fan Su quickly realized that without sufficient spiritual power, his physical strikes were futile. Her resilience was too formidable. At that moment, clarity dawned. Vengeance was out of reach in his current state. He saw her begin to rise from the ground, dragging Ao along with her, and knew it was time to run. The three of them had to escape before the situation spiraled further out of control. He wondered where the scalpel was. Its absence was troubling because that blade appeared to be the core of her strength. As they moved, Fan Su's senses sharpened, alert to every move and sound. Deep within him, instincts told him that there was another presence nearby. He could feel the energy, an ominous, dark force, messaging him silently. When asked where they were heading, Ao hesitated, caught between fear and instinct. In response, Fan Su saw figures hiding behind a corner. Two others, evidently frightened, had been observing all this time. Calling them cowards for fleeing at first, he now accused them of returning merely to seek help, their faces pale with terror. But Fan Su knew that the only way forward was to confront the challenge head-on. His voice was steady as he declared that they would have to go through each of the 4 doors, no matter how frightening it was. Fear was tangible in the air, and the young boy expressed concern that their time was limited, especially with the monster still hunting them relentlessly. Yet Fan Su remained resolute, ignoring the nervousness around him, convinced that unwavering courage was their best chance. Suddenly, a strange sound behind them signaled that the ghost was drawing near again. Fan Su's awareness heightened. He sensed that seizing the scalpel was crucial. He realized that the moment he managed to steal the blade, the ghost's behavior would change drastically. Panic surged through him as he hurriedly opened a door, shouting for everyone to run. They bolted up the stairs, desperation pulling them forward. In a flash, the door behind them shattered into pieces, a testament to the ghost's fury. Its face twisted with malevolence as it ascended the corridor, snarling that she would retrieve what was hers. Ignoring those behind him, she advanced with relentless cruelty, demanding the scalpel's surrender. Fan Su stood his ground, preparing to defend himself at any cost. When she attacked, he managed to parry her blows, but she quickened her assault, sinking her teeth toward his neck. They found refuge in another room, but the ghost was relentless, her malice undeterred. In that place, she shifted her focus, attacking a chubby young boy with terrifying precision. She snatched the scalpel once more, retreating in her relentless pursuit. Each time she escaped with the weapon, they moved in different directions. Another door, another corridor. Yet her adaptability was uncanny. They hurried toward the northern door, reaching the elevator in hope of a safe escape. Just as they tried to enter, the ghost appeared again, pushing open the door and preventing their passage. Frustration boiled over as they attempted the southern door, only to be caught once more by her serpentine agility. Her cruelty was unmatched. She was a monstrous, unpredictable force, capable of turning every attempt into a deadly trap. Each failure made it painfully clear that stealing the scalpel was a double-edged sword. Every attempt to retrieve it brought them closer to death. Despite her incredible speed, Fan Su still possessed the ability to revive, each resurrection granting him new insights, a chance to redefine his strategy. It was as if he could foresee her next move, almost like a precognition rooted deep within his spirit. He was aware that a safe passage existed to his left, a hidden escape route, but a sudden, sharp sensation at his neck, almost like an unseen weight, grounded him. That moment marked his 9th death, confirming his understanding that each attempt was perilous. Still, he guided everyone toward that secret pathway, convinced that victory was within reach. The ghost reappeared behind them, moving with dark intent. She approached Fan Su once again, her eyes burning with malevolence. At that critical moment, Ao spun around, warning him to beware. Just as she was about to strike Fan Su in the face, he successfully dodged, narrowly avoiding her attack. Their standoff was intense, each of them locked in a deadly game of movement and precision. The ghost, exasperated, demanded the scalpel once more. Fan Su managed to defend himself when she struck, but the creature then aimed a vicious bite at his neck. In that encounter, they fled into another room, where she shifted her focus, attacking a chubby boy again. The scene painted anew, an unsettling tableau of violence and desperation. Once more, she snatched the scalpel and disappeared into the shadows, moving in another direction. They raced toward the northern door, reaching the elevator shaft, hopes high that this would finally lead to their salvation. But the monster was there again, forcing open the door and blocking their escape. Desperation mounted as they tried the southern door, only to be ensnared by her cunning agility. The pattern was relentless. Each attempt to steal the scalpel brought with it the certainty of death. Despite her frightening speed and lethal tactics, Fan Su retained the ability to come back to life, learning with each resurrection. His mind worked swiftly, evaluating each scenario, each possible trajectory. Somehow, he knew the secret to survival lay in foreseeing her moves, that she was, in some way, an extension of his own spiritual power, perhaps even vulnerable to his awareness. He recalled a narrow passage to his left, a safer route he'd seen before. But an immediate, almost instinctual impact to his neck told him that death was imminent once again. He had now experienced 9 such deaths, each reinforcing the harsh reality. The only way forward was to outsmart her. Guided by this insight, he led his companions toward that route, hoping their actions could turn the tide. In the midst of their frantic escape, the ghost appeared once more, her features twisted into a grimace of fury. Her relentless approach was matched only by Fan Su's resolve. As they pressed forward, Ao warned him, his voice tense with concern. Fan Su took a deep breath, assessing his next move carefully. At that moment, the ghost lunged again, her claws reaching for him. With a swift, practiced movement, he dodged her attack, a narrow escape that seemed almost miraculous. Her frustration was palpable, yet she continued her pursuit with increased ferocity. Fan Su's mind was racing. He had learned her attack patterns, and each death had sharpened his instincts. The pain he endured each time she struck only served to strengthen his body and deepen his spiritual understanding. As they neared the end of their desperate journey, they prepared for the final confrontation. Every instinct told Fan Su that the key to survival was within reach, perhaps in the form of that hidden passage or a final, decisive move. The ghost's presence loomed behind them, relentless and cruel, her eyes glinting with malice. In that moment, Ao turned, warning him once more to stay alert. Fan Su acknowledged this with a nod, his senses heightened. The ghost surged forward, claws outstretched, aiming to bring him down. But Fan Su anticipated her move, rolling to the side just in time and avoiding her lethal grip. Her savage eyes locked onto him, disbelieving that he could evade her. Her fury only intensified, and she pressed her attack relentlessly, aiming for his vital points. Yet Fan Su had learned her rhythm. Each time she came close, he dodged, countering with swift, precise movements. Her attempts to overwhelm him grew increasingly desperate, but his own resolve was unbreakable. Meanwhile, Ao watched the scene unfold, bewildered at Fan Su's resilience. It was as if he had unlocked some secret knowledge, the ability to predict her future strikes, to anticipate her strategy. The pain and fatigue only fueled his intuition, making him sharper with each encounter. The ghost, now visibly frustrated, snarled in frustration and rage. Fan Su's focus remained unshaken. He knew that to truly prevail, he needed a decisive moment, one where he could turn her own strength against her. With that thought, he gauged her next move, waiting for the perfect opportunity. As she lunged forward once more, he sidestepped, pushing her off balance and exploiting her momentary vulnerability. The battle reached a fever pitch, each move more frantic than the last. The ghost's cruel, unpredictable nature made her deadly, but Fan Su's mastery of the patterns and his inner strength kept him afloat. He understood that her power was rooted in chaos and malice, but also that resilience and awareness could turn the tide. This ongoing confrontation encapsulated the essence of their struggle, a relentless fight for survival, intelligence, and mastery over their fears. Every death, every revival, was a step toward understanding her true nature. And although the path was fraught with danger and suffering, Fan Su's unwavering determination propelled him onward, inching closer to a final resolution. As the chilling realization dawned upon him, he hurriedly approached Fan and inquired about what had transpired. Fan responded by assuring him that everything seemed to be functioning normally, as far as he could tell, asserting that following the logical path was essential for survival. Yet, a gnawing doubt persisted in his mind, for he observed that even the doctor had fled the scene upon seeing the place. That detail suggested that perhaps this was not the actual exit, but rather something far more terrifying, so terrifying that even she, with her unyielding courage, was afraid. An ominous sensation crept over him, as if he stood before the very mouth of an abyss, a dark chasm swallowing all hope and light. The other members of the group continued to question why no one had run away, why they had chosen instead to stay put. One of them sat down, declaring that a little rest after such a harrowing ordeal might be wise. With a moment of reflection, the person had an idea. Rising to his feet, he urged everyone to stand once more, and they resumed their cautious walk through the maze-like corridors of the hospital. The silence was oppressive, thick enough to drown out even the faintest whisper of their own thoughts. He approached a heavy metal door, hesitating for a moment as he wondered whether running into the unknown outside was truly the safest course. As he began to open the door, he hesitated again, voicing concerns about risking everything. But he knew deep down that retreat was impossible. They had no choice but to push forward into the darkness that awaited beyond. Gripping the cold handle, he pulled the door open, and the shadows swallowed him whole. Inside, visibility was zero. Absolute darkness enveloped the space, so dense that any attempt to see was futile. The profound silence was interrupted only by the sound of his own breathing, his heartbeat echoing painfully in his ears. It was as if the night had consumed the path they had taken, leaving no sign of their trail. The only option was to keep moving forward, regardless of the fear that clawed at their minds. With every step, it seemed as if the fabric of time itself had been torn asunder. The usual flow of seconds and minutes was distorted. It felt as though the corridor stretched into infinity. The sense of endlessness weighed heavily on him, the journey feeling like an eternity. After what seemed an interminable amount of time, an unending span that blended past, present, and future into one, they finally saw a faint light. His eyes snapped open, and he found himself standing in front of the entrance to the academy, a place that seemed undeniably familiar yet ominously altered. Questions flooded his mind. Had they truly escaped, or was this merely another illusion? His companions hurriedly rushed ahead, their faces alight with relief and triumph. One of them, perhaps the youngest, exclaimed that they had finally broken free from their nightmare. The desire to leave that cursed place behind drove them to move quickly, eager to return to normalcy. Yao, another member of the group, called out to Fan, urging him to run faster as well. But Fan Su, already sensing that something was amiss, cast a cautious glance backward. The only thing visible was their school and the hospital. Both had vanished without a trace. A sinking feeling settled over him. He couldn't accept that they had escaped without consequence. The thought that the ghosts, the remnants of their fears, had simply disappeared was too unsettling. If the hospital could obliterate itself, why did the shadows of those spirits remain? How could he possibly make sense of that? He was haunted by visions of his wife, her face etched into his memory, and a terrible thought took root. He knew that for her to perish in such a manner, she had to die at his hands. The idea of her needing to be slain drove him to a frantic state. He had to see her again, to hold some semblance of closure. His mind raced with troubling images. He found himself standing before a car, trembling as if compelled by forces beyond his control. He whispered to himself that she must die, that they needed to go home so he could finally end her suffering. But the driver suddenly slammed on the brakes, startling him out of his dark reverie. Now, sitting in the passenger seat, the driver murmured quietly that she couldn't simply disappear like this, that her absence was unnatural. Panic overwhelmed him, and he dashed home, desperate to find her. Climbing the stairs in a frantic rush, he ignored the driver's complaints about unpaid fares, dismissing them as insignificant amid his panic. Bursting into his house, he shouted at the emptiness, insisting she couldn't have left him that way. Yet, the house appeared normal, calm, mundane, unremarkable. He scoured every room, searching desperately, yet nothing revealed her presence. Collapsing to the floor, he muttered that she must have been killed 18 times over, by his own hands in some twisted imagined past. How could he go on living with this suffering? The torment inflicted by the ghostly doctor was meant for revenge. He had accumulated rage and pain to confront his demons, to end the phantom ghosts that haunted him. Now, however, all signs of those spirits had vanished, leaving him stranded in a world devoid of spectral menace. Lying on his bed, he wondered where all his anger and hatred had gone. What was the point of life now? Without feelings, without vengeance, what was left? Suddenly, a message flashed on his phone screen. It instructed him to check the news. His heart pounding, he unlocked the device and read about a fire ravaging the academy building. The blaze was so intense that it consumed everything within its walls. The report stated that more than 11 people had perished, including several key figures, among them the infamous F-Su. A strange sensation of excitement flooded him. He found himself amused by the news. The report detailed that his body had been discovered, dead, and that the mysterious incidents might not have been finished after all. It seemed as though everything was a game of hide and seek, an elaborate, sinister game meant to keep him unsettled. Now he was certain that he might finally encounter his wife again. His phone buzzed with numerous messages from the boss, demanding that he return to work. He chuckled bitterly. The boss was dead, yet his orders persisted. It was ironic, despite being gone, the boss's commands still reached him. Then a chilling message appeared, blood-stained, gruesome, claiming that just because he didn't speak didn't mean he didn't know. An unsettling force emanated from the phone, forming an ominous eye that seemed to watch him, radiating with malevolent awareness. Commanded him to follow. Calmly, Fan grasped the eye, telling it to stop possessing his phone. He was determined to hold onto his only device. As soon as he did, the illusion shattered. Curiosity burnt within him. What new mystery might await? He moved toward the ruins of the academy, now reduced to smoldering ruins. Carefully, he inhaled the burnt air, recognizing the smell as real. Suddenly, he saw her. A figure he recognized immediately, standing amidst the debris. It was Feifei, smiling broadly with excitement. She approached him, touching his shoulder gently and asking if everything was real. She remarked that he was becoming quite bold, but then, without warning, she grabbed his arm and leaned in, revealing her knowledge of what had happened. Just as she intended to walk up the stairs, another figure appeared, Ao. He approached with a questioning tone, asking if the others had forced Fan to work. Fan responded that he actually enjoyed his job, and he asked where the boss was. Ao pointed toward the rear of the room, where the boss seemed to be standing, strangely unaffected by the chaos unfolding around him. The company, as always, was bustling, typical, and unaffected by the destruction. Fan began to question whether what he saw was genuine or merely an illusion. If the boss was still there, he wondered if the chaos was real or just a trick of his mind. When he finally reached the boss, the man was questioned about his silence in the group chat. The boss, unfazed, responded with irritation. He scolded Fan for being late and joking about commissions, even in death. Fan, disgusted, muttered that even dead, the boss's attitude was repulsive. The boss pointed accusatorily, asking what he was talking about, the way he mentioned death. He then commanded Fan to speak correctly, reminding him that he was still very much alive. Suddenly, Fan drew the ghost doctor's weapon and aimed it at the boss. The man groaned and collapsed. A faint smile played on Fan's lips, knowing that the boss was, at last, no longer among the living. The staff members, witnessing this, all rose and looked on in silence. Fan stepped toward Ao, giving him a reassuring pat on the shoulder and asking what had happened. But suddenly, Ao's body began to swell unnaturally, transforming into something grotesque. The scene shifted with alarming speed. Fan realized that all the corpses around him were cursed, their bodies distorted by some dark force. He began to focus on ending their suffering, intent on destroying these cursed remains. As he finished, he questioned aloud who could have been responsible for such atrocities. Had they really had their fill of entertainment? Or was this just another stage in the nightmare? His mind grew muddled. He could not tell reality from illusion anymore. Finally, he found himself waking up, lying on the ground, surrounded by writhing figures. They beseeched him, pleading for salvation. It was then that he understood. This entire nightmare was a dream. Or was it? The twisted figures continued to struggle and scream, their suffering palpable, as if time and space had dissolved into chaos. The boundary between waking reality and nightmare blurred completely, leaving him stranded in a surreal world where nothing was certain, and the fabric of existence itself seemed fragile and breaking apart. Certainly, here is a highly elaborated, rewritten, and expanded version of the provided text, transformed into a polished, engaging narrative suitable for narration, with all numbers expressed in words and extended to meet the required length. In the pursuit of supporting creators and enriching the variety of content they produce, viewers are often encouraged to interact with videos not through mere viewing alone, but by engaging actively in ways that help the creators grow. One such form of interaction involves a simple act, lifting a finger to express a positive response, without the need for words, gestures, or complicated actions. In this case, viewers are invited, in a gentle and unobtrusive manner, to express their appreciation by refraining from clicking the dislike or thumbs down button. Instead, they are encouraged to show their approval silently, merely by choosing not to perform the negative reaction, thereby helping content creators to reach a broader audience and gain confidence in their work. At the same time, there is a subtle call to action aimed at fostering a sense of playfulness and curiosity. Viewers are encouraged to activate a small, mischievous notification, often known as a little bell or tiny alarm, which, when triggered, serves as a symbolic gesture of support and engagement. This tiny icon, concealed within the interface, is designed to be a playful and unobtrusive instrument that allows fans to stay informed about new updates or fresh content with minimal effort, almost as if awakening a small, playful fairy that whispers news about upcoming videos or surprises. Following these gentle prompts, the message concludes with a warm farewell, marked by sincere appreciation for the viewer's time and engagement. This farewell, often accompanied by light musical accompaniment, leaves the audience with a feeling of connection and gratitude, reinforcing the notion that their support, however subtle, plays a meaningful role in the creative process. Throughout this process, the focus remains on fostering a community where interaction is simplified yet impactful. Every small gesture, whether it's abstaining from negative feedback, clicking a tiny notification icon, or simply listening attentively, contributes to a collaborative environment where content creators can thrive and produce even more engaging, juicy, and enjoyable material for their audience. In essence, the message encapsulates a gentle reminder that sometimes minimal actions can have a significant ripple effect. By choosing to refrain from certain negative interactions and instead participate in small, playful ways, viewers become integral parts of a creative ecosystem, supporting, encouraging, and nurturing the growth of content that brings joy and entertainment to many. As the music fades, signifying the close of this brief but heartfelt message, the creator expresses gratitude for the viewer's presence, fostering a sense of community transcending words. Without fanfare or explicit calls for engagement, the message leaves a lasting impression that every small action counts in the grand tapestry of digital expression, and that shared support, no matter how subtle, is the backbone of creative endeavors that aim to entertain, inform, and inspire. This passage is now expanded and rephrased to meet the length requirement, capturing all the nuances of the original message while transforming it into a more literary, smooth-flowing narrative suitable for further use or narration. If you need further adjustments or a specific length, please let me know.